So this talk is called Why Use Data Platform on Forms. On the programme, I do have ASL at the beginning of the talk title, but when I gave this talk before, I realised there's a very narrow set of people who know what ASL stands for. Some people are too old to know what it stands for, some people are too young to know what it stands for, which is depressing. So I've dropped it from the talk title, but it's the same talk. So just a little bit about myself then before we get started. My name's Chad. I can use a clicker. I'm a web developer up in Skye, up in Leeds, sorry, not in Skye. So I work for Skye in Leeds. So I basically do a lot of work. It's mostly JavaScript, a little bit of Ruby on the Skye.com website. I have also done work for, so I've not always been a web developer. I've also kind of had a brief stint as a producer, which is a bit like a product owner, so kind of things like interaction design, user testing, co-creation, workshopping, that kind of stuff. Also, in my spare time, a lot of the topics we're going to go over in this talk, I kind of do kind of casual training for companies and stuff like this. I've kind of done talks for kind of GDS and things like that about this. My pronouns are they and them. I don't use she and her. I'm going to actually kind of cover why people might be telling you what their pronouns are a little bit later on. But if you kind of tweet about this or blog about this or refer to this later, I might go by they or them, not she. I'm Kitation on Twitter and GitHub and all of the things because I like to sound cool. And my email address, which I'll put up at the end if anyone's got questions they want to ask me later or something like that, it's just hello@Kitation. So let's get started. People are complicated. People are complex. Software is nothing without people to use it, okay? Because if people don't use our software, eventually, when none of us are getting paid, software doesn't work unless people can use it, etc. So people are a fundamental part of everything that we do when we build software, design software. People are complicated. We come from an infinite number of backgrounds, histories, experiences. No single person is alike. The problem with computers is computers are very not complicated. They can kind of do very complex things, but they're not really as complicated as people. But we try to funnel all of these people, all of these experiences, we funnel them through kind of single user journeys, right? So you think about like Amazon, if you're buying a book from Amazon, we all go through the same process to buy our book from Amazon. We all go through the same process when we sign up to buy a conference ticket, for example. Even though we've all come from different countries, languages, genders, socioeconomic backgrounds, all of those things. And the way kind of UX has traditionally dealt with this is by trying to cast a really wide net to catch as many people as possible. So I want as many people as possible to be able to buy this book or go through this journey or use this service. And we kind of cast this really wide net. And the problem with that is there are always going to be some people you leave out, people who can't use your service for whatever reason. And also you might have captured users that have attributes or histories or something that you weren't quite expecting. So there are issues with funneling everybody through single journeys. We're trying to move away from this, I think, and this is kind of with the future of the web especially. So something like Spotify is Discover Weekly, where Spotify basically doesn't just look at the music that I listen to, it looks at the music everybody listens to, and uses that to generate me a personalised list of music it thinks I will like. And as kind of, these kind of buzzwords like big data, machine learning, as these become easier and more affordable for kind of like medium-sized businesses to be able to kind of handle this information and work with it, we're going to see more and more of this kind of personalized web, and that's kind of a really big thing that's going on. So Spotify is obviously using behavioral data for this. It's looking at things that I've listened to and what other people have listened to and how things relate to each other. But a way that people can and kind of do this on a smaller scale is to use demographic data. It's to look at you and say, okay, we know where you're from. We know what gender you are. Therefore, we think you're going to like these products, or you're going to want to use this journey, or you're going to want to use this version of our service, etc. Sorry, it's incredibly warm in here. Just bear me a second. Okay. I'm going to talk a bit about assumptions, and that's kind of the main kind of thrust of the talk, I guess. We know that all assumptions are wrong. It's the kind of the clues in the name. But we use assumptions a lot. We kind of use stereotypes a lot. But we know in our hearts that they're wrong. Girls like pink, for example. It's an assumption. We know it could be genuinely correct, but we know that it's wrong. And then kind of the inverse of this is we know that all facts are right. And I know this is kind of a very kind of straightforward thing to say. Or what I kind of mean by this is we're experts, right? We're experts in our domain. We know if you work in UX, you know users, you talk to them, you do research on them, you do testing with them, you're experts in your domain, like I work in the media industry, therefore I kind of have to be a domain expert in how the media industry works. We're the experts. So there are things that we know, and these things are facts. And people pay us because they don't know things. The issue arises is when we forget what is an assumption and what is a fact. All our assumptions become correct. There are too many things that we just know, and we don't remember how we learnt them, where we learnt them, who taught them to us. There are lots of things we just know, and if someone says, how do you know that? You go, well, you just know, everybody knows. Like, it's things that are so obvious about people or culture, all of these things, that you never really think about whether there's any scientific backing to them. It's like, there's no evidence for it, but it's a scientific fact that I know these things. And this is kind of what I deal with people. So let's go to an example, because I think this has all gone a bit kind of like woolly. And gender. So gender is something I kind of specialise in. I've kind of given talks a lot about gender before. But this is things we know about gender. We know that people are male or they are female. We know that male and female are two different things. We know, I'm not very good at drawing Venn diagrams, but this is essentially what it is, right? So people are either male or female. They're in one of these circles. They're not in both of these circles. They're not outside of these circles. And that there's no kind of crossover or movement or anything like this. Like, this is what gender is. And this is, when people talk to you about the gender binary, this is kind of what we're talking about, which is how we end up with form fields that look like this. So when you're asking a user what their gender is, you may think to do something like this, or a radio button gets used a lot. And everybody who uses your site can use this drop-down, and there's no issues with it. And this is a thing we know. We know that there is female, we know there is male, we know there is man, we know there is woman, we know there is all this stuff. But these are assumptions, these are not facts. The facts are kind of really much more complicated. I've come up with many tortured analogies for gender, like there was a worse version of the Venn diagram, which I've binned, but this is the gender spectrum analyzer. And what I want to kind of get out of this bit is, when you're asking someone what their gender is, what do you actually want to know? It's a very complicated question. Gender is actually built of lots of different things, and it means lots of different things. So if we think about, I don't know if we do, so you think about chromosomes, right? So you think about kind of genetics, you might say. And as developers, I don't think we actually want to know what people's genetics are. But, we have this concept that there's XX for women and XY is male. This isn't strictly 100% true. If anyone's kind of following the issues with, there's been lots of issues with athletes and the Olympics athletes who appear female but actually might have Y chromosomes. There are things like 1 in 1,000 women who actually have 3 X chromosomes, and you'll never know. You don't have any symptoms. There's nothing. It doesn't really cause any effects. But you might have 3 X chromosomes, not 2. 2008, a woman gave birth, nothing new, but she had XY chromosomes, but she naturally still gave birth to a daughter who also actually had XY chromosomes. So it's not something that works 100% of the time. But you're not really asking people what their chromosomes are. Sexual characteristics you might think about. You might go, okay, then, say we're developing an app. So when I've given this talk before, most of the questions I get of people who work in the medical industry, and they say, yeah, okay, but we're doing an app that's about childbirth. We're doing an app that's about, like a period tracker or something around those lines. Therefore, only women are going to use this application. Because that's what we do. We kind of say, if you have the ability to get pregnant, you're female. If you have the ability to impregnate somebody, that means you're male, and that's kind of how these boxes work. We have the concept of being assigned a gender at birth. So basically, when you are born, a doctor looks basically at your genitalia and goes, female or male, and that's what goes on your birth certificate. It's kind of very simplistic. But we have people who are intersex, so people who are born with an attribute that actually doesn't quite fit into these boxes very well. And I'm kind of also trying to talk about transgender users. So transgender people are people who are assigned one gender at birth, but actually transition to be another gender later in life. So this means that there are people who are male, they are legally, socially male, they identify as male, but they can still have kids. There's been a news story recently, actually, I think it's like last week, about the UK's first pregnant man. So you can't assume, even if something that you think, I know that only women can get pregnant, that's not a thing that you know, that's an assumption. You might want to ask people what their gender expression is. This is kind of how people present their gender to the world. I'm dressed very feminine today, but I'm not like in heels or anything, which is good because I feel very overdressed already compared to everybody else. And I think like if I put a dress on, I don't know if I could cope. But actually, you might want to be asking about this if you're kind of going, well, I'm selling, a makeup product or something. Actually, you might ask about gender in that circumstance, but actually, kind of anyone can wear makeup. It's not really a thing. Gender roles, obviously, being a woman in tech, having women in tech, that's something that kind of goes outside of your gender role. I know that places like Twitter, so Twitter doesn't ask you what your gender is, but if you ever go to your Twitter analytics, it will tell you how many followers you've got of each gender. And it basically tries to work this out by kind of the name you use on Twitter and also the things you talk about. So a lot of services has gone, well, I basically only really talk on the internet about software engineering or video games. So a lot of sites will assume I'm a guy because they are male things to like. So you might look at your stats, and my follower stats, there's a lot of, says I've got like 80% of my followers are men, and I know that's not true, but 8% of my followers are software engineers. So, we're making these assumptions and then we're turning them into facts. That's about gender role. That's about saying, well, women have this role, men have this role, and therefore I'm going to use that to make assumptions about you, which we'll go into in a little bit. And then identity. So the issue as well is that we don't really have very good numbers for this, but between kind of 1% and 5% of the population identify as something that is not male or female. They identify as non-binary, genderqueer, agender. These are words you might have kind of heard about. And what that means is that for people, so I'm non-binary myself, so it means that for people like me, if you give me this field form, I can't fill it out because I am neither of those things. And there are lots of people for lots of different reasons are neither of those things and will hit issues if they come to your site and they have to fill this form field out. But what kind of issues? So what does this kind of mean for you as a business? Because I think when you talk about user experience, I'm not a UXer, but for me, user experience is basically, these are things my company wants, these are things my user wants, and it's part of my job as when I've done bits of producing or even as a front-end developer to kind of find that nice middle ground. So what does this mean for your business if you're asking me about my gender but I can't fill it out correctly? It means you have data about me which is wrong, and data which is wrong is useless, essentially. That you are wasting people's time, developers' time, analytics time, assessing all of this data which is inaccurate. It means then that you're going to use this inaccurate data to make inaccurate assumptions. I don't know if anyone else, I thought this was only me, but a lot of people have brought this up to me in other talks. YouTube. There are a lot of pregnancy test adverts on YouTube. Like, all of the time. Has anyone experienced this? Watching YouTube and there's loads of pregnancy test adverts. Yeah, see, the other one weren't really shaking head. All the guys are looking at me very blankly. But yeah, I have this. It's not like I was watching pregnancy videos. I was watching like video game like playthroughs. And it's just kind of like every 20 minutes going like, hey, pregnancy test. And you're like, what? Google thinks I'm female for reasons I don't quite understand. And so it's gone, okay, then so you must be female. And we all know that all females want to have children, and we know that all people want to have children are going to want to buy like our really expensive testing stuff, pregnancy tests and things like this. But you can see what I mean? Like, these are kind of assumption based on assumption based on assumption. And that's wrong. That's wasted advertisement space, essentially. Like, if you actually looked at the videos I was watching and then went, hey, we could just advertise you like this new PS4 game, I might have bought that. Advertising space is kind of limited. And if you're wasting it based on poor assumptions, then obviously that's kind of less revenue. It might mean I don't use your service at all. I think that more people are kind of becoming we're becoming more aware of data, not just gender, but data in general. And if you have to fill out a load of questions when you register for a site or buy a product, you drop out. I find this, especially if it's a product I can get elsewhere. If I go, you buy the thing, and then they go, oh, no, you have to register for an account. You're like, I don't want an account. I just want this, pair of socks or this book. And there's a lot of times where I'll get to the account registration, especially if it asks me a load of questions, and I go, do you know what, I'm fine. Wi-Fi is terrible for this. If you use public Wi-Fi, they ask you a load of questions, gender as well. And I kind of go, well, actually, I'll just use 4G because I don't want to have yet another site I'm registered to. I don't want to have yet another company owning data about me. When I don't come to London that often. So actually, I don't want to have to do all this registration process for a service I'm going to use maybe twice a year. So I might not use your service, and I'll tell my friends not to use your service, because the thing you find with minorities, either kind of ethnic minorities, gender minorities, sexuality minorities, is we're all friends with each other, we all know each other. If you think about conferences, actually, if one of us has a bad experience at a conference because maybe there's no code of conduct, maybe the gender balance is really heavily weighted in one direction, we might say to our friends, hey man, this conference isn't very good. There's no women here, or there's no gender neutral toilets here, or whatever. What does this mean for me as an individual? So that's the business. Your assumptions can be painful. I don't like watching the pregnancy test adverts. I can't have children. I'm not going to have children. It's annoying. But for some people, perhaps who maybe have lost a child recently or have had that in their families or in their friends, you're basically people have said this to me, they basically now just can't use the internet. They can't use YouTube because these constant adverts that are wrong are painful. They're difficult. And so they just drop out that service altogether. There was a case in America, I think, I assume it's America, where a shop, I don't know what shop is, Target maybe, basically knew that a teenager was pregnant before she knew she was, and they just kind of sent a load of things to her house going like, congratulations on the baby, and then she was like, hey, what? And then her dad was like, what? And that's caused issues. That's caused issues for her. That's had nothing to do with, it's not really the website's fault necessarily, but it's something that happens to people long after they've used your website. This is something that's going to affect somebody's life minutes, hours, days, weeks after they've actually kind of left your site. When your data is leaked, not if, when. Security is terrible at the moment. Everything is getting leaked all of the time. Well, we've had, 2-3 Yahoo leaks now. More and more sites, so pornography sites are getting leaked. The Ashley Madison leak's a really good example of this, where actually, when that data was leaked, that hurt a load of people, because all of a sudden you have this massive list of people who have committed adultery, and we have opinions about that as a society, and those people are still kind of living those consequences. People are vulnerable. If you think about, so I don't want to get too into politics, but there's this big thing with Trump, obviously, at the minute, and he was on about building this registry of Muslims or whatever because he doesn't want them in the country. And a lot of people in tech kind of quite rightly said, well, we don't want anything to do with this. We're not going to build your Muslim registry. We're not going to build your registry of gay people, which is kind of happening in some American states. But we're kind of doing this all the time. Think about Facebook. Facebook is already a registry of gay people. It's already a registry of kind of ethnic minorities, religions, all of these things. And if you're asking people about their gender, even if you allow them to say that they're transgender non-binary, you basically now have a list of data that's really, really sensitive. It's really personal and can be used to hurt people. But you don't think of yourselves as having a registry of all the transgender people or having a registry of all the gay people or whatever. You think to yourselves, I'm selling some books, I'm selling some, I work in a platform as a service, whatever. And all data is connected. I've worked for an organisation where on the employee profile, the sexuality list is restricted by the gender I had to choose at the beginning. So I can't just say, I'm gay, I have to say, I'm a gay woman. So basically, you've got things, all these things are really connected to each other. So you get one thing wrong, but that might not be the only thing you get wrong. But I think it's gone a little bit weird, hasn't it? I think gender's complicated, so I think we should go back to something really simple, like names. Names are simple. And the thing with the gender stuff, we don't always ask people about gender, and actually it's probably a thing that's kind of less popular, and it means I'm kind of running out of people to talk about gender, so I thought I'm going to have to add something to this talk. But names, right? We always ask people what their name is because we're either going to send them something, we want to refer to them in an email, we want to check against some ID, etc., etc. And this is what a name looks like. So we have a title, a first name, optional middle names, and a surname. So we can bin middle names out because no one cares about those. We know that middle names are optional, and it's very rarely I've ever been asked on the internet for my middle name, although it has happened once or twice. So a name is a title, a first name and a surname. So let's start at the beginning. Titles. There's someone who I heavily respect and admire, and it's myself. And I have quotes about titles. Please stop asking people what their title is. So first of all, you don't have to use a title. So by title, we're kind of talking about Mr., Mrs., Doctor, Captain, Flight Commander, whatever. There are obviously legal things around you can't use a title in order to kind of defraud somebody. So you can't say, oh, I'm Doctor. I can't say I'm Dr. Chad and then, get someone to like let me into a hospital, or I can't say, you know, like I'm captain whatever and then try to get a military discount and stuff like that. But the social titles, you Mr, Mrs, Ms, and others, there's no legal obligation to use those. It's perfectly legal and legitimate for you to not use a title at all. I have lots of friends who don't use titles. So if your title field is mandatory, I have to give you inaccurate data, or I'll just won't use your site at all. People don't have to use it. And the reason I don't like titles is because no one ever allows the title that I use on their drop-downs. So I use mix as a title. It's gender neutral. Papers have been reporting it as the transgender title, which is why I think a lot of people aren't using it. But it's not. Like, it's for everybody. And I spoke to a journalist, actually, who has switched to using mix because it allows him to have an extra step of anonymity. So when people see his article, instead of it being from, I don't know, like Mr. R. Jones or whatever, it's now from Mix R. Jones. It gives him that extra level of kind of separation, makes him slightly difficult, slightly harder to find or slightly harder to kind of look up. And the reason this is an issue, and this sounds like a really, really tiny thing, and a lot of people say to me, like, well, it doesn't really matter, like, just pick whatever title out of the list if you can't find the one that you use. This is on my driving license. So I did a talk at a rental car company, and they were like, oh, we don't allow this title. And I was like, but you want people to give you information about their driving license, but I can't give you all the information about my driving license because you won't allow me to put my real name on here. I also I work with children, so I do co-clubs and stuff. So I have to have a criminal records check every so often. And the website, which is the only time I've ever had to use my middle name on the internet, all over it, all the messaging all over it is, the name has to match your ID. The ID you're supplying, like your registration, you have to match the ID. So if you've got middle names in your driving license, you have to put the middle names in here. If you use your full name, you have to use your full name in here, etc. But they didn't allow me to have mix as a title. And I spent about 20 minutes worrying about it. So I was like, well, this is going off to this is checking against police records and stuff. And I am giving you my ID with mix on it. And I know it's tiny, but you're going to look at this and go what are you trying to do here? And I kind of still went through this, I still needed to do it. But if it's just a site where I'm buying a product or I'm registering for some Wi-Fi or whatever, and you say to me it's really important to use your real name, but I can't use my real title, I'm not using your website. So please do this. Either stop asking about titles, make them optional, or add mix, because it's great. So now we've established that a name is a first name and a surname. Job's a good one. Here's some facts we know about surnames. You can kind of tell where this is going because I've put comedy quotes around facts. But here's some facts we know about surnames. We know everybody has one. We know everybody has one surname, which is why we kind of say to people it can only be 20 characters long in our forms or whatever. We know that surnames are a family thing. They come from basically the man who has the most ownership over you, so that is either your husband or your father. I kind of quasi-joked about this, and my girlfriend's really run with it, that if we get married, me and my female partner, we basically can't have a surname, because that's where surnames come from. They come from the man who's closest to you. But they're a family thing, right? So you have your father's surname, or your husband's surname. And we know that surname, last name, and family name, they're all the same thing. We can just swap those labels in and out as much as we please. So if you go to a form and it says first name, last name, that's the same as saying first name, surname, or given name, family name, or whatever. We know these things are facts, because we're experts. Ta-da. Facts about surnames. I'm still learning a lot of these, because lots of people like to give me examples. So Portuguese and kind of some other languages have multiple surnames, so they have the surname of both parents. I've got a Portuguese friend who told me about this, and she was saying, that both those, that's her name, like her name is her first name, and then her two surnames. But that is her name. She can't just use the last one, because that's not her name, although kind of a lot of people have to do for convenience. Or they use the first one, but then, so if you just have, you can only have one surname, and it can't have spaces in it, or it can't have double-barreled names, they have hyphens in, but a lot of people won't let you put characters in a name, for example. So there are languages and cultures that have multiple surnames. Obviously, kind of there is, where are we going? UK. There's no legal obligation in the UK to give your children your surname. You can give your children whatever name you want. And this matters when you want to do something like, say you have a family plan for something, and Spotify doesn't do this, but Spotify has family plans. And some sites have family plans where they say, you have to all have the same surname at the same address. But families don't have the same surname. You don't have to give your kids your surname. You don't have to change your surname when you get married. Obviously, people get married, remarried. Families are different. So if you say, your family has to all have the same surname. Doesn't really work. Which is why kind of surname as a family name, again, now doesn't quite work very well. A Quebec friend told me that you can't change your surname in Quebec at all. Even when you get married, a woman was very upset about this because she couldn't change her surname to her husband's surname because it's not a thing that's allowed. Like, you're never allowed to change your surname over there unless it's kind of very, very exceptional circumstances. And I think France might be similar. I don't know. But it means a married couple aren't going to have the same surname. So it infuriates my mother, something chronic, when she gets letters to Mr., like, Dad's initial and her initial surname. She gets really annoyed about it because you're not... Mr. is like my dad. It's not like the pair of them combined in some kind of like horrific thing. And then kind of places like Japan, you say the surname first. It's not the last. It is the last name, but it's not the last name when you're kind of perhaps referring to someone in an email or referring to someone in conversation. There's different levels of politeness when you use a surname, when you use a first name. We tend to be very overly perhaps polite in emails. You don't, if you're emailing someone you don't know, you don't say like, "Hey Bob," you say like, "Hey Mr. whatever." I'm not very good at making up names on the spot, as you might have noticed as we've gone on. And this isn't even all of them. There are names where the spaces are important. There are names where the hyphens are important. I've got Irish friends who can't use the apostrophe in their surname because of data, because of websites or whatever. So we've established that a name is first name and maybe some surnames, kind of one to many. But really, hang on. Yes. Everything you think you know about names is wrong. There's a really good blog post, and I can't remember who wrote it, which is terrible, but it's called basically Assumptions Programmers Have About Names. And it is a list of hundreds of things we think about names, and they're all wrong. In the UK, there is no such thing as a legal name at all. I'm currently in the process of changing my name, so obviously Chad isn't the name my parents gave me. And I'm in the process of kind of changing my first name, but that's not there's not a really big thing to do that. I mean, the way you change your name legally in the UK is to just use the new name. I don't have to get like rechristened. I don't have to go to like a massive thing. There's obviously deed polls and stuff like this all around it, but there's no such thing as a legal name. People have stage names, people have nicknames. Michael Caine, it was a thing recently where it's not his real name, obviously. It's not a name he was born with. It's his actor name, it's his stage name. But he was fed up of getting stopped at airports because people look at him and go, "Oh, you're Michael Caine." Look at his passport with his birth name on it and then go, "Well, this can't be you. This can't be your passport." And they think some kind of fraud's going on. But it's not. It's just because people have multiple names. People might be using fake names for reasons. They're maybe domestic abuse survivors. They may not want to be found by kind of relatives or kind of people might be chasing them. And so they will use different names. So you can't just say to somebody, "What's your real name?" because there's not really any such thing. For like 1,000 more examples of this that are actually good, there's a really good book called Design for Real Life, which goes into a lot of things about basically all these things we assume about people, these kind of basic facts about people, how they can cause distress or harm, how basically our systems can break them, how they can break our systems. And there's a conference called NUX, and Sarah, she did a really good keynote for them last year talking about all this stuff and kind of things that she's had to fill in that are actually really difficult, oppressive, and basically no one's thought about this human first. Things about... I hate it when websites say good morning. Has anyone seen this? When you log onto a website and it says like good morning, and then kind of sometimes you go, "I'm not having a good morning." And you just kind of like, decides to talk to you. So far, basically, I've just complained at you. We good for time still? Hopefully, yes. I've basically just kind of complained at you and told you everything you know is wrong. But that's not what I want you to take away from this, because that's a very sad takeaway, and then you'll leave me like horrible red notes on the way out. What I want to talk about for the next kind of 20 minutes is things you can actually do to kind of help along with this, ways to kind of start conversations or ways to kind of start thinking about this in your design process, in your development process, that can just help you think about all these things and then hopefully design services that are more inclusive and are easier for people to use and will give you data and information that is much more accurate and easier to use for yourselves and your businesses. Stress personas. So stress cases is a phrase that comes from Design for Real Life. And it comes from the fact that as developers, how many of you are developers? Are you all developers? Yeah. We like the word edge cases a lot, so sometimes you get a bug come in that says, client can't use this form because we can't accept their apostrophe, the apostrophe in their surname. And you go, oh, this is an edge case. Like, how many people have got apostrophes in their name? But people aren't edge cases. People are human beings with lives and experiences. And to use edge cases is kind of very impersonal. It kind of stops us thinking about users. We just think about the computer then. So the idea is that we call people stress cases because they are putting stress on our systems by having circumstances or attributes or something that we're not aware of. So obviously when you're creating personas, or even when you're just kind of thinking about users, have at least one user you think of or kind of have designed that would put stress on your system through, maybe what if this person doesn't have a bank account and we have to go through a different process? What if this person doesn't have a name that we're expecting? What if this person doesn't have a gender that we're expecting? So these are for people who, when they encounter these issues, it's high impact for them, but it might be a low frequency. And that's part of the discussion. You kind of go, okay, if this is only going to affect 1% of our users, but that 1% of our users can't use our service at all, do we want to mitigate that risk in some way? Do we want to accept them having to go through a separate route, like maybe we're just going to eat the cost of them going through the call center because that's cheaper than us having to spend developer time on it, etc. But by thinking about that user and kind of having that in your list of personas, if you kind of work in a persona-driven company, can just help you have that conversation. Again, also from Design for Your Life. This is from a book called Forms That Work. It's called The Question Protocol, and the idea is that when you're designing a form, and it doesn't even have to just be about users, it can be about actually anything. But when you want someone to give you some information about themselves or their business or their family or whatever, for each question, kind of have a little card where you answer these 4 questions. So this is, who needs this? And by who, you mean like an actual person in your organisation. Do legal need this? Do marketing need this? Do we need this because we've got an ancient data centre that we can't change and so we need to feed it into there? Why do they need it? Do they need it because it's a legal thing again? Do they need it because it's a data thing, whatever? So who needs it? Why do they need it? Do we need it or do we just want it? Can it be optional? Is it required? And then what happens if the data is wrong? So if this is required and the user can't fill this in, what happens to them? What happens to us? If they have to fill this in with data that is wrong or fake, or even they just fill it in with fake data anyway for kind of the fun of it, what happens to us as a business? What happens to them as an individual? And having this as part of your design process when you're thinking about your data models or thinking about even, at any point in the process when you're thinking about forms or data, just to have these questions and to sit as a team and think about them helps you to have that conversation. Because I'm not trying to tell you to stop asking people what their name is or stop asking people what their gender is, because obviously, business needs come first. And we can't just have people just buying stuff and then just sending it anywhere or whatever. But if you take anything away from the talk, it's that. It's about having these conversations and thinking about it. Ask people. If you don't know, ask people. I went to a really good talk about people talking to their security teams more often, and it was mostly for UXs. But it's actually about thinking, just kind of talking to different kind of places in your organisation, thinking about the data that they want, why they need it. Talk to communities. If you're kind of going, okay, we're a UK-based company, but we want to move into kind of the European territories, do we need to kind of talk to some people with domain, do we want to kind of talk to some people kind of from those countries or from those cultures and ask them what would be the best data for them, what would be the best kind of form design for them? Because people know who they are, you don't. We're the experts in terms of maybe how people use computers or maybe we're experts in our domain, but we're not experts in who people are. So if someone emails you and says, I can't use your website because of X, Y, Z, they're not wrong, you're wrong. And it's about kind of making that compromise between those two things. And be flexible. People need to change their information with you often. Like I said, my deed poll literally arrived yesterday, so I'm going to spend next week changing my name with everybody, and I'm expecting it to be not fun. Please try to make it more fun. People need to change, but people need to change data that you're not expecting to change, like their gender, like their name. And not even because I've gotten married or anything, like I'm just changing my first name. So it's going to come at a time when perhaps you don't have a process around that. You might have a process around what happens if someone gets married and they change their surname. You might not have a process around someone's changing their first name for fun. Or not for fun, but you know what I mean. And just think about the future. These things are only going to get bigger as we become more international, as we kind of push into countries, territories, languages that, as they're kind of coming on board to the internet, especially. The thing with the gender, with non-binary people, as that's becoming more visible, more and more people are going to start kind of identifying as non-binary, I think, in the future. So you need to make sure that you've allowed space for that you don't start, it's like translation, right? You never do translation first. You always do your site in English, and then someone goes, this needs translating, and then you go, oh, a translation framework would have been really good. It's about kind of thinking about those things at the beginning, kind of like, you're UK now, but you're going to move forward. People from other countries live in the UK, so you can't just go, well, we're a UK thing, so we're going to use the English name standard. It doesn't really work like that. Forms, because I know they said it's about more than forms, but forms are important. Users love text fields. I love text fields. Like for name, just have full name and it's a text field. For gender, just have a text field. As developers, we hate this because they're easily spammable. Analytics hate it. It's very difficult to get names out, to get data out. So you think about gender. You think about, so you're a woman and it's a blank gender field. Well, how would you write that down? Do you write woman? Do you write female? Do you write F? You know, do you write what? You're always going to have someone who thinks they're really clever and they're going to write like dolphin in it. You know how forms will say sex on them and then people write yes please on the margin because we're all very clever. You know, like that stuff's going to happen, and that means it's actually much harder to get data out of those fields than it would be if you just had kind of radio buttons, for example. And when I'm stuck, when I'm lost and alone, I don't know what to do, I always reach to my friend and mentor Zoidberg and say, well, why not both? Why can't we have both of these things? Is there not like a nice middle ground? Facebook is a good example. So this is a free text field now, actually, but back at the time when I did this slide, for gender, Facebook basically had a list of about 60 options for gender, and I could pick as many of them as I wanted. So for me, this is fairly open. I can kind of build my gender up even out of lots of different terms and things. So for me, it's lovely. I can put in what I want. And you can still kind of go to your data and say how many people have put non-binary in the gender field. You know, there's that mix there. So that's one way of doing it. Scratch do a thing where you can put male, female, and then they've got a blank text box for the third option. So you can still analyze this. They can still look at this and say, so Scratch is a tool for teaching children how to code, essentially. So they can still look at it and go, well, we've got 20% men, well, 20% males, 40% females, and then a number of people who are the third option. But I can still put in whatever I want, but you can still get data out of this. When it comes to names, I've not yet seen this form design in the wild, unfortunately, but people have told me it's out there. You can use a field. You can use the full name field. This blog post is really, really good. I'll put these slides up on the internet at some point, by W3org. It goes through loads of things about international names that I'd never heard of, never really thought about before, from all different countries. It's not just about forms, but this bit. So ask people what their full name is, and they can write whatever they want in there, and they can make sure you can allow people to have characters and spaces and all those kind of things. But what you actually want to know is, how do I address this email to you? How do I address this letter to you? How do I put this information on your social network profile or whatever? And that's what the second box is for. And then people want to use stage names or so you might say, actually, the first box is your legal name, but what's the name you actually go by socially? And because I'm not done ranting, so one of the pieces of work I'm currently working, actually, is redesigning the form for people to kind of put in their kind of personal details on the Sky website. And I've been doing a lot of code reviews, which are fun and exciting. But it was a nice way to ease me in after the Christmas break. So I thought when I went in, I was like, I can't remember any code. It's been 2 weeks. So I thought I'd do some code reviews, and then I might remember some JavaScript at the end of it. And because of that, I've been looking at a lot of form builder, a lot of code that's going to form builders, and I've been looking at error messages. I am not invalid. Invalid is not a common word. If anyone's ever seen like the XKCD with the upgoer 5, the idea that there's basically the top 1,000 words that people use, and the comic is about explaining what the Saturn V rocket is, only using those top 1,000 words. So you can't say rocket, for example, that's why it's upgoer. Invalid isn't in the top 1,000 words. It's not a word that people use. It's not a word that like muggles use. Right? We use it as devs a lot because it's got a meaning to us. You know, invalid is a word with meaning. But to people who aren't in technology, invalid doesn't mean anything, really. It's not a word you hear very often. If users don't fit your system, help make informed inputs. We're very restricted on the characters we can allow in names, which is infuriating. But you can't just say to someone your last name is invalid, because it's not, it's their last name. Help them make an informed input. Say, actually, instead of saying your last name is invalid, you say, we can't accept your last name as spaces. And then you kind of go, oh, this is annoying, but maybe you can use like capitals to show that they're 2 words, or you can put a hyphen in, or those kind of things. It's not the user's fault that your data structure is old or broken or inflexible, and there's not a lot you can do about it, because you as a developer, myself, I'm kind of 1,000 steps away from the actual kind of data center. I can't just turn around to someone and say the data structure needs changing, because that's a monumental task. The mixed title, for example, like the amount of developer time it would take to put that into our system doesn't justify, apparently, the benefit of that. So allow people, just don't say to me, my title is invalid, just say, we can only accept these titles, and then I can kind of go, okay, then that's fine. So really, is everything we know wrong? And it might seem like so, because I've just been telling you that for the last 45 minutes. I don't think everything we know is wrong. I think everything we know is incomplete. I think that there's lots of things we're still learning about. I think there's lots of things that we haven't thought about, and that no one's ever really forced us to think about, because we don't see, maybe people are sending loads of emails to our complaints department, but we don't see that. We're removed from that as developers. You know, that's something that goes through UX, that's something that goes through support. You know, we don't really see it. But what I think is really important is actually our job to find out. We want to be experts in our domains. We want to, if we're asking users about information, we want to be experts in that information and how to talk to people. So we really need to go and find these out. So thanks very much for coming to the talk to find out. Like I said, you can email me, hello@Citation, or Citation on Twitter. I say this because actually a lot of people want to ask me questions, but don't like asking me questions in public because they don't want to seem like, especially on the gender stuff, a lot of people worry about being offensive. I'm not easily offended because I obviously want to give you this information, tell you what's going on. Also, because I'm working part-time at the minute, I'm available if people want me to come and kind of talk to your company about this or talk to your clients about this, because I know kind of push back to clients is the hardest bit of any process of changing anything. Or I guess, have we got time for questions, or are we out of time? I've got time for questions now if people have questions, or people can kind of grab me. I'm here for all 3 days, so people can kind of grab me where they're. Thank you very much. Thanks for not dying of heat stroke.